An article on Forbes says that this is the best $1,000 gaming PC. Yeah, this build right here. It's the iBuyPower Slate MR, and although I certainly don't have a lot of confidence on Forbes articles these days, I thought it would be interesting to fully review the entire process, including shipping, setup, and the performance of this build, and then afterwards, I'm gonna show you how to upgrade it. I know a lot of you are currently watching from Prebuilts that you may or may not have started to regret over the years after seeing the value of a custom PC build, so hopefully when I show you the upgrade path of this PC, that can help you out. We're also gonna be deep diving into this article because if this was written by ChatGPT, then our future isn't looking so hot. But what is looking hot is today's video sponsor, Corsair and their brand new IQ Link ecosystem. Now let me tell you, this is a genuine reaction that I had when I first built a system with these products.
I got chills. That looks good. Look how diffused that CPU block is. Oh my goodness, this is so neat. I am in love with this. Oh, I want to do another one already. Oh my goodness, that looks so good. That's crazy. I have not been this excited about PC hardware in a really long time. That is so cool. I don't know, man. That was genuinely fun.
All of that was completely unscripted and not sponsored. IQ Link was awesome to work with, and I'm ready for another build. The power here is that you can daisy chain these beautiful RGB fans together without any cables in between them, along with the radiator and even more fans all into one single hub. There's also now just one single connector that works with it all, so cable management is a breeze. IQ Link also works with a ton of custom water cooling products such as blocks and reservoirs, and if you want to take the aesthetics of your gaming PC to the tier S level, then check out the link down in the description. Big thanks to Corsair for sponsoring today's video. All right, so right at the top of the article under best gaming PC under $1,000, it says easily outclassing the competition. For specs, it shows that it's an AMD Ryzen 5 5600, an NVIDIA RTX 3060 12GB, 16GB of RAM, and an embarrassing 512GB SSD. I know, I'm probably the worst person on the planet to be ragging on a pre-built company using a 500GB SSD.
I literally just said in my last $500 build guide video that I'm using 1TB drives from here on out, but when you're limited to just Amazon and $500 for brand new parts, excuses.
But this is a $1,000 pre-built from a huge company. How did they get away with this? Back to the article though, this first line cracks me up. It says, if you have $1,000 to spend on a gaming PC, you get of processing power for the price with the iBuyPower Slate Gaming Desktop. That's not even English. This couldn't have possibly been written with ChatGPT. It was definitely a real human that wrote this and no one even double checked it. Quote, it has the kind of components which will deliver excellent 1080p gaming performance in esports games, and if you play with the settings, in some AAA games too. That part's actually correct, even though it does downplay the build a little bit, but then just a few sentences later it says, this kind of hardware works great for high frame rate 1080p gaming or even dabbling into 1440p in slower paced games. Kinda contradicts itself a little bit. For pros, we have solid performance in all games at 1080p, compact and attractive design, affordable price, and the only con is that the CPU is a generation old. I think they forgot a few extra cons in there. Here's the listing on Best Buy with the exact same specs, and it's still sitting at $999, so technically it's still under $1,000 like they said. I bought this exact model directly off Best Buy, and within a week or so, it finally arrived to my door. It was actually sitting right on my front porch with this outer iBuyPower box that's not even the same model as the PC that I ordered, and I'm personally not a fan that they don't even try to conceal this even a little bit for shipping because it's begging for porch pirates to just come up and steal this. Once I did get it to the studio, I started unboxing it to officially start my review, and the first thing that I noticed when opening is this huge quick start guide, and I'm actually a huge fan of how they do this. It not only shows you the basics of connecting up the PC, but the backside also shows some quick troubleshooting steps, including how to reinstall Windows. I've walked so many people through the process of how to do this in my own customer support emails, mostly just because they corrupt their Windows install or they download something malicious, so having that right there on the quick start guide is actually a really good idea. For the build itself, I also love this huge sticker over the I/O port to ensure that they aren't plugging their monitors into the motherboard, which again, we used to deal with a lot for our ZTTbuilds.com customer service until we added some stickers as well. I will note that they definitely used the wrong type of sticker though. After removing it, it left all sorts of nasty residue on there, and it was pretty annoying and actually kind of dangerous to try to clean up. But now it was time to start checking out the build itself though, and after removing the Instapack, which is very much appreciated, the first thing I noticed was this cheap and super ugly looking cooler on the CPU, not to mention this very ugly RGB cable that's attached to it. And yeah, that's just a manual RGB color, not actually the lights. If you look at the Forbes article and the listing on Best Buy, they're clearly using some form of actual RGB cooler, so honestly, this is some serious fake news that some gamers should rightfully get mad at, especially when the article says the case case comes with a, quote, good selection of RGB cooling fans. Now, as far as cable management goes, they actually did a pretty good job here, as both the front and the back of the case are nice and tidy, and I don't have any complaints here. The other thing I wanted to check was the power supply model, because I didn't see it listed anywhere, and to my surprise, this is actually a high power HP 1600 watt unit, and this is rated tier B on the PSU tier list, which you love to see. Whenever we go to upgrade this PC later on the video, I for sure thought that we were gonna have to remove this power supply and install a better one, especially one for a GPU that requires extra power than this 3060, but to my surprise, this is definitely good enough for what we're about to do. And one final thing I noticed during this quick inspection is that they used a micro ATX motherboard when a full-size ATX board is shown on the box. Again, I'm not sure if this image on the box is a completely different model or if it's just a different version of this Slate Prebuilt, but either way, I don't like my products to be different than what's being displayed, especially if I'm getting the worst version of the two. I never like when these companies put a tiny micro ATX motherboard inside an ATX size case, because it just looks like the hardware is hanging there and it leaves this ugly gap, and you see all these cables and connectors hanging down underneath it. Because of all these consistencies, I went back to the website to check on just what I actually ordered because I couldn't remember it, and I found even more inaccuracies with the description versus what I got here in the studio. Again, it says that I'm supposed to get an RGB cooler, which I didn't. It also shows that we're getting 2 black RAM sticks, and we got white ones with RGBs, which looks super random in here. And finally, the Best Buy photos also show that there was no M.2 SSD installed at all, which honestly looks cleaner than this ugly blue one that we got here shipped out. Now, the one positive here is that the Prebuilt does ship with an included keyboard and mouse, and these don't seem special or anything, and honestly, this keyboard felt very mushy, but this is an added benefit for first-time PC gamers, and at least gives them something to use until they can upgrade to proper peripherals. And before we boot the PC up, let's take a look at the pricing to see how much it would cost you if you were to just build this PC yourself versus spending the $1,000 that they're charging. And remember, Forbes said that this is the best gaming PC under $1,000.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
I put everything in a PC part picker, and I'm seeing a total price of $743, and to be very honest, that's about what I would actually expect from a giant pre-built company. Yes, it's $250 more expensive than the cost of the parts, but when you factor in shipping protections, employees, warehouse space, and all the overhead that they have, they're really not making a huge margin on this build. And just for accuracy, I did estimate that this ASRock B550M-C costs around $85 because it's not available anywhere. The Slate case is actually available directly from iBuy Power for $65, which I have listed. I don't see the high power PSU being sold anywhere, so I just put $60 in there to be conservative. And then finally, I did not include any CPU cooler. The stock cooler that comes with the 5600 looks better and probably performs about the same, so I think it's okay just to not include that. Now, as far as competition goes for a $1,000 pre-built, you guys know exactly where I'm gonna go first, Jawa.gg, because they're gonna have a ton of builds that absolutely smoke the price to performance of this one. Here's a beautiful 5600X build with 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 1 terabyte SSD, and a 6700 XT, which absolutely smokes the 3060, all coming in for less than $1,000 bucks. Jawa does have several builds like this, and you can always find better value there, of course, but we need to be fair because Jawa is a marketplace where people are selling one-of-one builds. They don't have an unlimited stock like the bigger companies do. While looking around for those types of companies, I saw that Starforge Systems has a $1,000 build with a 5600, 6650 XT, which again is much better, and a 1 terabyte SSD. The value of this one is much better than the Slate model. And I also found that you can even configure an NZXT Player One with a 12400F, RTX 3060, a 1 terabyte NVMe, and a much better looking design to be less than $1,000 as well. So I think I made my point very clear that this is certainly not the best $1,000 gaming PC pre-built on the internet right now, and it's honestly absurd that anybody would even say that out loud. But let's move on. Before we start throwing some upgrades in here, I wanted to fire up the PC myself and finish my review of iBuyPower's pre-built PCs just in general. This is my first time just touching an iBuyPower PC in general, but it's probably gonna be my last time as well. The first boot up took me to the normal Windows 11 install screen, and that's pretty standard, but what's weird is that it took 7 minutes for it to finally boot into Windows Desktop, and that's with my Ethernet cable unplugged so it couldn't download any updates. It also came pre-installed with NVIDIA's GeForce Experience so I could upgrade my driver easily, and also ASRock's RGB software so I could control the RGBs. There's also an iBuyPower button here at the taskbar which takes you to the portal, and this is actually pretty cool as you can review the PC for a free gift card, get a free month of Game Pass, and it also has information about their Minecraft community server and Discord community, which is pretty neat. I also did confirm that XMP was enabled on the RAM, and it's indeed running at 3200 megahertz. And the first test that I ran quickly was with Cinebench because I really wanted to see what this little deep cool CPU cooler was capable of. After a few passes, the temperature only got up to 81 degrees, which was surprisingly not terrible. I did try enabling enabling PBO after that, and the CPU ended up going to like 90 degrees almost instantly, so you definitely shouldn't be enabling PBO with a system like this. Honestly, there's probably not too many people on the planet that would buy a PC like this and know what PBO even stands for, so I think we're fine. And finally, one of the last things I noticed was that the BIOS version was version 2.8, which is just one version out of date, but that's still considered updated in my book. We also tested 10 different games with this original default configuration, and as you can see, the results are actually pretty good for 1080p gaming. We put the settings at high, very high, or ultra for pretty much all of these titles, and we didn't have any real issues. For 3D Mark's Time Spy, the build cranked out a score of 8,646, and that's not great for a $1,000 build, but it's certainly not terrible for a $750 build if you're just counting the cost of the parts. And speaking of which, I do want to upgrade the parts in here, and the whole goal of this is to show you the difference between a $1,000 pre-built versus a $1,000 gaming PC that you built yourself. Now, if you were building a custom PC, you definitely wouldn't make all of these similar part choices, but honestly, a Ryzen 5 5600 paired with a B550 motherboard and 16 gigabytes of RAM would be a standard starting point for a build like this. Where it gets interesting though is if we remove this $316 GPU, that drops our total price down to $427.13. Let's theoretically upgrade our SSD to a 1TB model, throw some cable extensions in there, and we're essentially left with about $500 to spend on a new graphics card. And which $500 GPU just launched literally last week? The RX 7700 XT and the 7800 XT. Perfect. Shout out to Power Color for sending out this 7700 XT. This is honestly a perfect addition to this type of build to essentially turn it back into a $1,000 gaming PC. Now, I'm sure you've seen enough of the information from all the launch videos last week about this card, but we are going to compare it to some other cards that we had in the studio. This here is an AMD reference design to the RX 6800 non-XT model, mind you, and these can be found for around $375 on places like Java, and we also have an 8GB RTX 4060 Ti from Zotac. This Power Color Hellhound version of the 7700 XT that they sent us is a beautiful looking graphics card, and this 12GB card is also a pretty thick boy with this 3-fan design, and it's honestly pretty heavy. Per normal though, with the Hellhound models, there's an LED switch here to change up the RGB colors, which is awesome, and this backplate is pretty clean with the logo and designs. So without further ado, first up we fired 3D Mark's Time Spy just for a consistent comparison across these cards, and the 7700 XT comes out in front with 14,609, and all of these are significant upgrades compared to the 8,646 score with our original pre-built. Next up we tested Modern Warfare 2, and not only are we getting better FPS numbers, but this is also in 1440p Ultra settings compared to the 1080p Ultra that we tested with the RTX 3060. And same thing with Fortnite, instead of playing at 1080p Pro, we tested with 1440p Pro, and we're still getting more FPS with the 7700 XT over the 3060. Now, before we move on, I just want to make it very clear that I'm not comparing the 7700 XT versus the 3060 directly. That wouldn't make any sense. What does make sense is that we're essentially comparing a $1,000 pre-built versus a $1,000 custom build, and these comparisons are actually pretty crazy. Building a PC yourself with a Ryzen 5 5600 and a 7700 XT essentially bumps you up from 1080p gaming to 1440p gaming, and you'll also get even more FPS on top of that. That's a huge difference in just the quality of your overall gaming experience, but of course, it comes at the cost of you learning how to buy and build a PC for yourself. And again, real quickly, here are the rest of the benchmarks that we tested with the 3 GPUs. As you can see, we have a natural progression of performance going from the 4060 Ti to the RX 6800 and then to the 7700 XT. You could theoretically squeeze any of these cards into a $1,000 gaming PC these days, but the clear winner here is the 7700 XT, at least against these other models. If you can spend just a few bucks more, then the 7800 XT provides even more value, and then the 6800 XT version is also a good play as well. Any of those options would be much better than the 3060 that's in this build, so I think the case is clear. You definitely should not buy this Slate MR from iBuyPower, and honestly, there's a huge case to just build it yourself, as I'm sure all of you already know. And if you do want some extra help with doing just that for your next custom PC, remember that I'll help you one-on-one with part selection at zackstechdrift.com/consulting. I've honestly been having a ton of fun over there, and we've been parting out some super high-end and exciting builds. And if you're still watching this video, then just know that Forbes also released another article called Best Budget Gaming Laptop, so I bought that one as well. Stay tuned for that video. And also click the video that's on the screen now for a different $1,000 custom gaming PC build, which again is going to be much better than this one right now.